8:30 in the morning. I call the June 11th meeting of the Millcreek Township Board of Supervisors to order. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda is public comment on agenda items other than development or rezoning applications. Do we have any public comment on agenda items? Being none, we'll move on. Item number 4 is approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. Any questions, comments, corrections, additions? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Item 5 is approval of the bills. Any questions, comments? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the bills.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Moving on to item number 6 is the presentation of our 2018 financial statements and audit. This is presented by the firm of Zelenkowski. Did I pronounce that right? Zelenkowski and Axelrod LLC. They're our auditing firm that was chosen to perform our audits. We have 2 gentlemen from the firm that's going to make a presentation about it. We have a microphone here. The 2 gentlemen are Dan Sefik and Corey Johnson. So I guess they'll share the duties there. There's a microphone right there. They've got it for you.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah, the clicker up here, so. Do you want me at the podium?
Well, it might be better if you're out there. That way you can see the screen. We have it on our screen here too.
Wonderful. Well, good morning. Appreciate you having us up here. This is our first year doing the audit. We're not here to be the bearer of bad news, so that's good news. Actually, your township, well, we work with a lot of townships, so your township's in very good financial position. So we're just going to start overview, the introduction, and contact info, results of the audit, some other required communications, and then we're going to get into a high-level financial statement overview. I'm Corey Johnson. I'm the engagement partner. This is Dan Sefik. Dan was up here, for a large portion of the audit, along with some of our staff, working with Mark and his staff. I want to say, Mark, thank you. You and your staff did a good job. That's why we're here in June getting this presented. One of the things with townships that we're always waiting on is the actuarial controls from the state, and that's out of all of our controls sitting here. And then actually we're going to talk about that a little bit as we get into financial highlights as to what's in the township's control, out of the township's control. When I say the township's in good financial position, I say that because if you take out the other post-employment benefits liability and the pension liability, which are 2 things that have the other post-employment benefit liability came onto your books this year. Pension came on a few years ago. They're large liabilities, and they have no offsetting assets, so it shows, a significant deficit position in your statement of financial position. You take them off the books last year and this year, pretty reasonable. Not a lot of change, very consistent, which is, I think, what we would expect is based on everything we learned throughout the audit. The audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards in the U.S. We had an unmodified opinion, basically means everything in your financial statements we believe to be materially accurate.
Okay.
This is just some required communications. We like to do it here at the board meeting. We had no difficulties encountered in performing the audit, no disagreements with management. We will get management representations before issuing our final reports, whether it's management signs a letter saying everything we've given you everything you've asked for, and everything we've given you is true to the best of our knowledge and belief. There's no management consultations with other auditors to our knowledge, and as I talked about for a second, the big new standard was the OPEB liability, which is very similar to the pension liability that was a couple years ago. This just gives you an overview of page numbers and what to look at. Look, if you're going to spend time reading the report, do read the management discussion and analysis. That was added a few years back with GASB 34. It's on pages 3 to 14. It gives you a look of kind of this year versus last year, some high-level analysis.
We'll just kind of go through some highlights of the financial statements. Pages 8 and 9, that's in the MD&A that Corey had referenced. This gives you a good comparison of government-wide results between 2017 and 2018. This is kind of where they take the results of the government and try to make it look like a business. So just looking at total assets, they remain relatively level with only a 2.3% decrease. In the business type activities, total assets and total liabilities both increased. That was as a result of the township came off its lease with the sewer authority early. That's always a good thing. As Corey had touched on, the OPEB liability was put on the books this year, the new adoption of the GASB standard, and that increase alone is about $27 million. If you want to kind of get into more detail of this, we'll look at note 7 in the financial statements. The remainder of the increase primarily due to the increase in the net pension liability, which Corey had mentioned are kind of out of the township's control. It's impressive to point out the township has no long-term debt. It's not typically common for us to see this for entities of this size, so that's kind of a feather in your cap you can hang your hats on. Corey kind of already touched on the restatement, the change in the pension results. If you take out the adoption of the OPEB, the increase in the pension liability, township had a very good year, very consistent with prior years. Page 13, this compares your governmental fund revenues and expenses from year to year. As you can see, there's only minor increases and minor decreases here. We're talking less than 3%, $30 million. So very consistent with the prior year. Pages 17 and pages 19 in your financial statement, this is where you find the general fund in your balance sheet and your income statement. The general fund did have net income this year of a little over $1 million. Very consistent with the prior year, with about 1.2. So strong results there. Township has a very strong cash and investment positions. It's around $20 to $21 million. A lot of this will help the township to complete their capital projects without relying on debt. Very positive. In the fund balance, there was about a $10.44 million unassigned fund balance. We take some ratio analysis whenever we look into this. Your budgetary cushion ratio, this is your unassigned balance to your annual revenues. That's about 37.6%. That's very high. Moody's typically recommends around 10%. So you guys are just illustrates how strong financial position you guys are in. We'll just move on to some significant footnote disclosures. Page 26, this starts your summary of significant accounting policies. This kind of just walks through how the township will account for everything. Note 4 is for your capital assets. Note 6, it's in your pension plan disclosures. The highlight of this is your plans are 87% funded, which is very good. And note 7 starts on page 54. This kind of gets into the OPEB disclosures. These were updated this year to make the notes look similarly to the pension notes. You guys have any questions for us?
A couple new things. So the financial statements will change in the next couple of years, just real quick. Next year, there's a new GASB out there for fiduciary funds, agency funds. So now really they're just on there as a cash balance. There will be an income statement for all agency funds going forward. So that starts next year. The following year is a big one for townships, counties, school districts. Leases come on the books 2 years from now. So that means capital leases are already on the books. Operating leases over 12 months will need to be reported and accounted for. You know, that could be significant depending on the number of leases you may have. Those are the 2 big changes.
And one other comment about the OPEB liability. The changes to the collective bargaining agreements that were instituted in 17 and 18 aren't reflected because they aren't in the current evaluation by the actuary. They will be for next year. So that liability is kind of capped. I mean, it still can increase because of the people that it doesn't apply. We eliminated post-retirement health care benefits for both the police and the AFSCME employees. So that means nobody's got post-retirement health care benefits. That will have a significant impact on that liability going forward. And you will see that first wave of that next year when the new OPEB actuarial report comes out.
Okay. Okay. Any questions, comments from the board? Anything else? Any closing comments that we need to know about? I think you've covered everything, but thank you for the presentation there, and look forward. It is a pleasure working with you folks. We're glad to hear the good news that that we're in good shape there. We like that.
Thanks.
Okay. Item number 7, what's Mark had set up there, is the Fire Commission presentation and recommendations from the studies that they've been conducting, and will be presented here by Solicitor Mark Shaw, and I think that Chairman of the Fire Commission, Randy Lakowski, may have a comment or two when the time is appropriate for that. I'm assuming that, is that correct, Randy, that you may have something? Okay. So, Mr. Shaw, whenever you're ready, the microphone's over here if you're looking for it. Or are you going to go there? Okay.
Good morning. Here to present the findings of the Fire Commission and the Fire Commission Vision Subcommittee for creating a vision for Millcreek's emergency management services. Fire Commission, a little bit of background on the Fire Commission. It was created 2 years ago to help the supervisors address important fire and emergency services issues. It has 9 members. There are 5 members from each of the fire departments within the township. There's 1 member from Millcreek Paramedic Service and 3 members who are township residents. The Commission has been active, resulting in supervisors taking several actions thus far, including approving the use of township fueling station for the fire departments and MPS, as well as passing an ordinance providing local tax relief to volunteers. The Commission, as part of its duties, explored the current state of Millcreek emergency services and focused in particular on the current challenges faced by the volunteer fire departments, which includes a lack of volunteers. The Commission subcommittee was formed earlier this year to create a clear future vision for fire and emergency services in Millcreek, and the subcommittee has been meeting several times a month over the last few months working on that vision. Before it began its actual work, it implemented a process to determine the future vision, and the committee's work involved first identifying what the potential options were, then determining what standards would be used to evaluate each option. It analyzed the pros and cons of each option under the standards that were selected, determined a rating system to objectively rate each option, and then each committee member independently rated each option. The committee then discussed the basis of each member's ratings, ultimately selecting an option based upon the total rating scores that were achieved after implementing that process. Once a vision was identified, they evaluated the potential fiscal impact of the selected option, as well as determining the tasks that would be needed to implement that option over time. Essentially, the committee identified 5 basic options. The first option is what we've called the private hybrid, which is a private nonprofit entity that would consolidate the 5 fire departments and MPS under one entity, and it would be comprised of both volunteers as well as paid staff. The second option was a private full paid option, which would be a private nonprofit entity, but with a force of fully paid firefighters. Third option was what we called the township hybrid. Under that option, the departments and MPS would remain independent, but the township would assert a greater level of control over the fire departments and assume various administrative responsibilities that are currently done individually by each department. Fourth was a township full-paid option, in which the township would employ a full-paid force of firefighters. Obviously, under this option, all of the volunteer departments would be eliminated, and how to ultimately manage MPS would have to be evaluated as that process worked through the system. And lastly would be the current system, which has the 5 independent fire departments and an independent Millcreek paramedic service. As I indicated, the subcommittee identified a rating system. Each option was then rated on a scale of 1 to 5 by each member, and they identified a number of standards that they relied upon in making this evaluation. Essentially, the rating standards included factors that would impact the ability to generate revenue, the ability to manage costs, the ability to achieve manpower needs, the ability to meet the community's needs and expectations, and the ability to meet the required level of service. Subcommittee also assessed the pros and cons of each of the options that were considered. For the private nonprofit hybrid, the pros included a paid professional management. It would achieve administrative, financial, and operational efficiencies to offset most of the added costs. They would have flexibility to address staffing. It would improve their fundraising capabilities by putting it all in one entity. It was the most cost-effective option in the subcommittee's opinion. It still encourages volunteer participation. The hybrid would still retain kind of an independent identity for the fire department and an autonomy, and obviously managing that entity, they would have more flexibility in doing that management than they would if it was a township-type entity. The con, obviously, would be that all the current fire departments would cease to exist. The private nonprofit full paid, offers some of those same benefits as the hybrid, but it significantly increases the cost, which would likely have to be met with a tax increase. The township hybrid offers, in our view, offered few of the same magnitude of benefits of the private hybrid, and then the added problem of creating additional challenges that would both impact funding as well as operations. One of the concerns being that if the township were kind of running the entity, the ability to engage in the fundraising would probably be challenged, as people would naturally assume that the taxes would cover the cost of that entity. Township full paid option offers similar benefits to the hybrid, but it would come at a steep cost, likely resulting in a significant impact on the taxpayers. And then lastly, the current option, frankly, maintaining the status quo, was a non-starter to the subcommittee, as the current problems would remain unresolved, and it delays a solution delaying a solution simply offers the risk of more challenging and costly solutions down the road. So ultimately, the recommended option based on the ratings from the subcommittee was the private hybrid. The private hybrid creates an independent functioning organization that would promote and build upon the existing spirit of volunteerism that exists within our volunteer fire departments. It would introduce professional management to ensure sound and cost-effective administration, and it would minimize the impact to the township's taxpayers. Once the subcommittee reached a consensus on the future vision, we went out to all of the fire departments and made a presentation to each members of each department. We presented the future vision, explained how we arrived at it, and fielded their questions and concerns. Some of the key concerns that we will have to keep in mind as we go through this process would include the impact of additional fundraising on revenues and how much increases can ultimately really be counted on, the impact of adding paid fire staff on existing volunteers and the concern that it may encourage them to not volunteer any longer, and third, the impact on the existing independent cultures of each of the fire departments. As indicated, in addition to the presentation to the fire departments, the subcommittee evaluated the possible financial impact of this future vision. First step was to obtain financial information from each of the departments, which we were generally able to do. We then first analyzed the cost of implementation needed to implement this vision. Types of cost evaluated included recruiting, initial management salaries, office supply and startup costs, accounting, legal, and so forth. The expected implementation cost range would be between $250,000 and $500,000, again, depending on the length of time it would take to actually implement. In addition, there may be some grant opportunities. There are some grants available for this type of activity that could offset some of those costs. We also looked at the overall cost of the vision itself once it was implemented, both from an operating and a capital perspective. On the operating side, the expected annual operating costs are about $2.5 million. On the expected annual operating revenues are just shy of that at $2.43 million. And this assumes the same level of LST participation by the township. And at that level, the cost expenses and revenues nearly balance. But that does assume that there's a 30% increase in existing or current fundraising levels, and that you do get some additional operating efficiencies to reduce some of the costs. In terms of capital, the current fire department fund balances appear to be sufficient to fund capital projects for the foreseeable future. The relief fund balances and funding can also help cover those capital costs. And we would also expect there to be some purchasing and equipment efficiencies that would also help offset costs. As indicated earlier, the subcommittee also reviewed the tasks that need to be done to implement the vision, which include things such as creating an implementation team, creating the legal and leadership structure of the entity, developing a budget for the entity, determining the funding and operational needs, developing a public and fire department involvement plan, determining the level of service required by the township, as well as ultimately needing an agreement between the township and this new entity. So ultimately, the subcommittee made its recommendation to the commission, and on May 16, 2019, the Fire Commission voted to approve the following recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. That recommendation is that the future vision for fire and emergency services in Millcreek Township is that such services will be provided via a private nonprofit entity that consolidates the fire departments and Millcreek paramedic service, and that has both volunteer and paid staff. This was a recommendation that was supported unanimously by all of the fire departments, and as a result, the commission requests that the supervisors review and approve this recommendation. And that concludes my presentation. Randy, I don't know if you have anything to add?
Nothing really to add.
Yeah, Randy, excuse me, would you come forward, please? Sorry. Once again, this is Randy Lakowski, who's the chairman of the Millcreek Township Fire Commission.
I really have nothing to add except to answer questions. Should there be any open issues?
Okay.
A lot of work was done.
Yes.
We know the execution and implementation would be lengthy,
Right.
18 months to 2 years. So the longer we wait, the bigger problem we'll have.
Of course, yeah.
Mr. Lakowski or Mr. Shaw, I guess one of the questions I have is one of the options you looked into was this township volunteer hybrid, and decided that would cause challenges for other kinds of funding sources. So I guess my question to you, gentlemen, is what would be the township's role in this? If it's the creation of a new nonprofit, is the township wouldn't be taking the lead in that? How would that process get started?
What we have is a bridge issue. We have six independent organizations right now. We need to create a new independent organization. In order to, if this was a typical startup, we'd have a founder leading us. Well, we have no organization, so we collectively need to find a founding board of directors create a bridge to implement this vision and essentially seed money to recruit the CEO, fire chief, to start the organization, do the legal work, and start rolling everything in.
Right, I guess to that, Mr. Shaw, I'm not aware if as a second-class township, we can create a nonprofit. I guess that's my question, is what does that process look like, and what role can the township play in creating something like that?
I think the role of the township in this scenario would be a support role and a facilitator role of trying to bring the organizations together, trying to, when I say support, both in terms of funding as well as support in terms of logistics and just trying to gather the folks together that ultimately need to create this entity. The concept would be is that this separate nonprofit would be an independent nonprofit, would not be an arm of the township. And as a result, it wouldn't then fall into some of the public entity requirements that would otherwise trigger if, in fact, the township were involved in forming it or you know, directing it. I think the idea would ultimately be is once this entity is organized and set and ready to proceed, we would have an agreement between the township and this entity under which the entity would provide fire protection and emergency services to the township, not dissimilar to the types of agreements that we currently have with the fire departments, but this one obviously would be a little more detailed and more descriptive than the current agreements, kind of identifying the levels of service that are expected and so forth. There may ultimately need to be some agreement on the part of the township on funding gaps if the entity is not able to raise the funds they need to raise, that the township would then support, you know, those gaps that may occur out into the future. I think that's kind of the concept is to try to keep it independent at this point with the idea of that would minimize the most impact to the taxpayers. It would allow the fire departments kind of to retain their independence that I think our sense in the meetings is that they want to do in one fashion or another, and it seems to be, to us, frankly, the logical step.
Right. Okay. I think we've, if I am understanding this, and maybe I'm reading too far into it, this is maybe one step to get out of where we're at right now, and that we have left other options on the table. This isn't the end-all and say-all for this, right? In other words, this would be a step to hopefully take care of it. Maybe it will work for 50 years. Maybe it will, you know. I'm not saying it won't. I'm just saying, you know.
As we're looking to the future,
Yeah.
every option has risks.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
There is no crystal ball.
Oh, yeah.
But we're looking to mitigate the risk. We feel this option has a high probability of success with having a professional CEO
Yeah.
/ fundraiser.
Uh-huh.
We need more community engagement. More
Okay.
community engagement should generate additional funding, hopefully additional volunteers.
Right.
We have built into the plan full paid firefighters to help plug gaps that we currently have. Those assumptions are built into the financial plan. That number in the assumption is between 8 and 20 firefighters.
Right.
That would immediately fill a gap and a risk we have today.
Okay.
Should we be successful with the community engagement, we may not need 20 full-time firefighters, we may only need 8.
Mm-hmm.
So we built in flexibility to allow us to move with what that environment is.
Okay.
Should this, quote, fail 10 years, 15 years ago, it could evolve to option number 2,
Yep.
which is the full paid
Right.
hybrid, which
That-
would still be a contract service to the.
Right.
So we sort of built in the plan with the backstop.
Right. Of course, maybe I'll just cut right to the chase here for the residents out there. And by no means is this a threat or anything, but folks, these are the options that we have out there. What we have is there's challenges. Their own departments are saying that there's a challenge. And I know, I'm not trying to quote one of the fire chiefs of last year. He said that the model of the volunteer system is failing. And that's nothing that's to be taken against the volunteer companies. That is words that they have said themselves, and they're concerned about it. So If we don't support the fire departments in our own individual ways, the only other way to provide that service is that three-letter word called tax. And then we're talking something different. And of course, that is in the most extreme scenario for right now. That's why I'm saying this right here would be hopefully to fill in that gap that we're missing right now. So, yeah.
And the problem that the township faces is not unique to the township. I mean, this is a problem
Everywhere.
that's occurring statewide, and the state is also looking at ways of trying to make it easier or make it more attractive for volunteer firemen, and hopefully they do some things that help the process.
Right.
But I don't know that we can necessarily count on that.
That's right. So we have to be our own creative people in doing this. Okay. Questions or comments? Jim, do you have anything that you want to?
I just wanted to thank Randy and Mark and
Yeah.
Melanie and the rest of the staff for putting this together. A lot of work went into it, and
Yeah.
definitely think it has a lot of positive aspects to it for the future and working towards this.
Right.
I did also want to mention, in terms of the subcommittee that worked on this, Mike Barton, who was a township resident, worked on this as well.
Yeah.
Dan Olet, who's the township president and associated with West Ridge Fire Department,
Yep.
was on the subcommittee as well as Melanie Page, that you pointed out, the assistant treasurer, and Randy
Right.
and myself. So.
Yeah. And by no means is the work of this commission done. They still have a lot of work left there. So this is a recommendation as far as the vision for what we see Millcreek Firefighting Service will be. So, of course, then we'll review this and do what we need to do, I guess. John, any further comments, questions you might have, or either one of them?
Oh, no, I appreciate the work.
Yep.
Sounds like a concept that has merit. I agree with the chairman. We should probably want to have a few more discussions about it before we take a formal action on it, but
Yeah.
it's definitely something worth
Something we have to do, yeah.
reviewing and considering, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item number 8, capital budget amendment requests. Mr. Zahaski.
Yes, this is in relationship to actually one of the bids and quotations that you'll hear next. The CAT 308 excavator was originally budgeted at $125,000. The quoted price is $96,453. So they want to put the $28,547 to reserve in case some other project comes up short.
Okay.
And that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the capital budget amendment.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Thank you. Item number 9, bids and quotations. Our first one is for a mini excavator from the Public Works Department. Gary Snyder.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I am seeking permission to purchase a Caterpillar 308 mini excavator from Cleveland Brothers Caterpillar for the price of $96,453 under the state contract number 4400019950. This is the budgeted item and came in a little more than $28,000 under budget. I would submit this as a recommendation.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase from, what was the company? Cleveland Brothers.
Cleveland Brothers, yeah. Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Okay, the next one is from Sidewalk Accessibility Project, phase number 7, bid award, planning and development. Matt Waldinger.
Thank you very much. Bids are opened for the Millcreek Township Sidewalk Accessibility Project, Phase 7, on June 4th, 2019. This project is comprised of the installation of 146 accessibility ramps at various locations throughout the township. The locations and bid package are available for viewing in the Planning and Development Office if anybody would like to see it. This project is to be paid for using Community Development Block Grant funds, which have already been allocated for this use. There were 3 bids submitted. The first bid was Lindy Paving Incorporated $471,997. Amendola Development, $253,510. And Empire Excavation and Demolition, $184,450. It is the recommendation of the Planning and Development Department that we award the Millcreek Township Sidewalk Accessibility Project Phase 7 to the low bidder, Empire Excavation and Demolition, for the contract amount of $184,450.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve that contract to Empire at a price of $184,450.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Next item is ramp repair for damage done by plows, Public Works, or actually go back to you, Matt, I think.
Thank you. Yes, over the course of the last couple of years, there were 6 various curb ramps that have received damage due to snow plows or other impacts with vehicles. We solicited telephone quotes from 3 contractors for repairing those curb ramps. The 3 quotes were received from Vavala Construction, a quote of $10,980. Maya Brothers Construction, $8,490. And Amendola Development, $13,120. So it's the recommendation of the Planning and Development Department that we award the contract to Maya Brothers Concrete for the quote of $8,490.
Okay. The damage that's done to these ramps, just a little chipping is what it is for the tactile areas?
A few of them, most of them actually are the detectable warning.
Yeah, that's tactile
domes that
warnings,
get,
yeah.
ripped off. In a couple
Okay.
cases, the curb was caught, and then that caused damage to the ramp,
Right.
threw it out of the line.
In our efforts to keep the streets as wide as possible during snowplow operations, it sometimes happens, so. Okay, questions or comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Mayer Brothers for $8,490.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
Just to clarify, it's Maya Brothers, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
Maya.
No, Maya.
Maya Brothers, yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I also vote yes.
And so do I.
Mr. Chairman, a quick question
Yes,
for
sir.
Mr. Waldinger.
Yeah.
Matt, I'm just curious, this repair work, is that something that could be built into our accessibility project bids, or do those have to be 2 separate items due to the nature of the grant funding?
Well, I don't know, Attorney Shaw, would that
I'm just curious if it might be more of a cost savings measure.
Consent decree. I believe we try and keep the CDBG money to complete as many ramps so that we can meet the consent decree and the timeline.
Right.
In the future, though, once we're beyond that,
Well, I'm just curious.
We have a general obligation to maintain and repair ramps as they're damaged under the ADA, so it's arguably falls within the scope of our consent decree in terms of we generally have that obligation on the consent decree as well. Part of it may be a timing issue in terms of where they're located, and I know the attempt on the ramps is to try to put them all in one location to get the kind of the best overall price so that the contractor's not jumping around town.
All right, just curious.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 10 is a public hearing on a petition requesting a change in zoning classification. This is for Millcreek Township for property located, I'm just going to give the addresses on it, 1920, 1960, 1980, 2020, 2022, 2052 Edinburgh Road, 2042, 2060, 2065 Interchange Road, 940 Millcreek Plaza, 654 Millcreek Mall Unit 400, 5800 and 59 Peach Street. Those are all Zone C2 Commercial District to be changed to C4 Regional Commercial District. Mr. Puz.
Good morning. At the regular meeting on May 7, 2019, the Millcreek Township Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the proposed rezoning at 1920, 1960, 1980, 2020, 2022, 2040, and 2052 Edinburgh Road, 2042, 2060, and 2065 Interchange Road, 9040 Millcreek Plaza, 654 Millcreek Mall Unit 400, and 5 5800 and 5900 Peach Street from C2 General Commercial.
Mr. Paz, I'm sorry, could you also include the county index numbers?
I was just going to
for
ask
the
him that
record?
there. Would you do the index numbers?
I can if you like.
No. Beat me to the punch there.
The current zoning's the C2 General Commercial, and the proposed change in zoning is to the C4 Regional Commercial. During the Erie County Department of Planning's review, the department stated that the proposed rezoning is generally consistent with the Erie County Comprehensive Plan and is generally consistent with the Millcreek Township Comprehensive Plan,
Okay.
newly
Okay.
adopted.
Okay.
Were there any
Question?
comments at the planning commission meeting?
Other than the fact that it was, consistent with the future land use plan.
Okay. And it makes generally good sense to make it all the same zoning district at the mall with a variety of uses that are occurring up there, you know?
Correct, yeah, the
Yeah.
C4 district is more consistent with a mall. The C2 district is not so much,
Right.
has less uses, and in general, the C4, the purpose of the C4 is to incorporate those large tracts of land into a mall-like atmosphere.
Right. As we see the face of retail changing and more uses are being put into mall settings. So, questions, comments from the board? Okay. We're not voting on this today, is that correct?
Yes, but you'll need to see if there's anybody from the public who wants to provide testimony.
Okay. Anybody in the audience here would like to comment in regarding this? This is a public hearing, this portion of the meeting. Being none, we'll note the record. There were no comments from the public.
Mr. Shaw, just to clarify, we typically do take an action after a public hearing for rezoning requests, do we not?
Oftentimes, we do. It just depends on the timing of when we can get the ordinance put in place. There's a little bit of a delay in putting the ordinance in place in this case because of some differences with some addresses and code indice numbers and ARC numbers and so forth. So it delayed putting together that ordinance, and we didn't get it advertised in time. So that's why that'll be up.
Okay, so
It'll be available for the next.
The hearing was advertised, but not the
Correct.
actual vote.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Item number 11 is proposed ordinance 2019-7, an ordinance to amend Millcreek Township zoning ordinance 2011-8, as amended by changing the classification of certain parcel of land situate in the township, described as follows. Bryant Street, Erie, Pennsylvania, now zoned R1 single-family residential, to be rezoned R2 low-density residential. Of course, we did vote on that there at a prior meeting. Now this is the official ordinance adopting that action there. Do I hear a motion on that?
I'd make a motion to approve ordinance 2019-7.
Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Item number 12, proposed ordinance 2019-8, an ordinance to amend the Millcreek Township zoning ordinance as amended by changing the classification of a certain parcel of land in Millcreek, as described as follows. 4042 and 4058 West Ridge Road in Erie, now zone C2 General District, to be rezoned to R4 High Density Residential District. Do I hear a motion on that?
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2019-8.
Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second that.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Okay, and to be consistent in how I voted, I'm voting no on that. Item number 13, proposed ordinance 2019-9. An ordinance in Millcreek Township repealing Chapter 21, Article 2 of the Township Code concerning towing, amending Chapter 40, Article 4 of the Township Code concerning parking and towing during weather events, and repealing and replacing Chapter 137, Article 4 of the Township Code concerning removal and impounding of certain vehicles. Mr. Shaw, do you have any information on that?
Yes. This ordinance would consolidate various provisions relating to towing by the township of vehicles within the township. It removes some inconsistencies that were found among the various provisions. It clarifies various provisions, and it sets forth a new process for towing service providers to qualify as providers for Millcreek Township. First, the ordinance would repeal Article 2 of Chapter 21, which includes provisions relating to police enforcement, authority to tow, promulgation of rules and regulations, towing charges, and the Towing Review Board. Some of these provisions have been moved to the consolidated location in Chapter 137, while others, such as the Towing Review Board, have been eliminated. Second, as indicated, all the towing provisions have been consolidated under Article 4 of Chapter 137 of the Millcreek Township Code, which governs vehicles and traffic. This would appear to be a more logical place for these provisions. Included in this article is the authority relied upon by the township to tow vehicles, which include both the township's police powers as well as authority under various state laws. It provides a process for towing companies to be approved under the code, which will be managed by the police chief, and how towing charges will be determined, which will be approved by the Board of Supervisors. The ordinance also allows the chief of police to establish rules and regulations to be approved by the Board of Supervisors by resolution, and provides for how owners of vehicles that are towed, how they will be notified. And lastly, the ordinance amends Chapter 40, Article 4, which relates to towing during weather events, and just simply it refers back to the new provisions that are adopted under Article 4 of Chapter 137.
Okay. Questions, comments?
Is that all?
That's all.
Wow. Okay.
The previous process had kind of a contract process in place, and the existing contracts are coming up at the end of this month, and after reviewing and looking at what other municipalities were doing, this is more in line with kind of how they manage their towing process over time. And it also made sense as we began looking at the various towing provisions in the code that there were some inconsistencies, and it made sense to put it all under one roof, so to speak. So
So if somebody should have the misfortune of having their car towed, these are the policies and regulations on, you know, what the township expects and what can be done legally. So hopefully that will never happen, but in the real world it does happen. So anyway, questions, comments? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass ordinance 2019-9.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Okay. Item 14, we have several ordinances that are being considered or under review. Mr. Shaw, do you want to comment about those?
sure, just real quickly, the mall ordinance that would relate to the hearing that we just had will be ready for a vote at the June 25th meeting. The sign ordinance, which is an ordinance that we've been working on for some time, that is expected to come up at the July 9th, 2019 meeting. And lastly, there's a debt ordinance relating to some borrowing that's occurring, and the goal is to have that ready for the June 25 meeting as well.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, next item is item number 15, Resolution 2019 R28, resolution pursuant to Resolution 2015 R20 and the Municipal Records Manual to approve proposed disposition of certain township records. This comes from Chris Filson from our IT department in regards to the Millcreek Police Department dash cams. The videos, when they get to their maturity and expiration of the dates June the 12th to June the 25th. They ask, and this is a typical request that we get every meeting, I think, now to dispose of those. So any questions or comments? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-R-28.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I also vote yes.
And same here. Okay. Item number 16, Resolution 2019 R29. It's Volunteer Firefighter Incident Response Policy and Procedures. Mr. Shaw, were you going to handle that one, or
I can
Mr. Morgan? Okay, yep.
Gentlemen, this is more so a housekeeping item. The township has traditionally allowed volunteer firefighters to respond to incidents in the township, but there was no formal policy or procedure in place for that. Part of our review of kind of our fire response operations, both from in the Fire Commission perspective and in-house, was reviewing what kind of policies and procedures we have to document these incidences. And there really wasn't anything formal on the books. So this is a one-page policy and procedure, simply documents that we formalize that we do allow Millcreek firefighters to respond to incidents, provided they provide our administrative offices with evidence that they are, in fact, firefighters currently serving in a local department. and sets forth procedures for them to respond and also to do some formal reporting after the fact for our payroll and HR administrative purposes.
Okay. Yeah, this is something that, as John is saying, that we traditionally have allowed for this. It's just now this is a formalization of a policy, of a drafted, documented policy on that. So, and thank you everybody for their work on that, John, and of course Jim Bach, and also Mark Shaw, and of course the payroll department too, because they all had a bit of this here too. So, thank you. Anyway, calling for a motion to act on that resolution.
Make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-R29.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I will second.
Okay, Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Okay, item 17 is Resolution 2019-R30. This is regarding a tennis court usage policy and the associated fees for that. I'm going to refer this over to our Parks Director, Ashley Marsteller.
Hello.
Ashley, can you give us some background on this?
Welcome, Ashley.
Yeah, thank
Nice
you.
to see you here.
Thank you for having me. Well, the township has 6 courts, 4 at Asbury Park and 2 at Zook Park. And this process was prompted by an increased request for usage and just a general interest in utilizing the courts that we have by our residents, and kind of following some of the closings of the local courts also in our community. So we've gotten requests for more time for open play, lessons, leagues, and just various usages. So the Parks and Rec Commission was consulted and kind of instrumental in developing this new policy to give an organization and structure to using our tennis courts. Several of our other park amenities already have, including ball fields and shelters already have rules and regulations set in place. So we're moving to make the tennis courts also adopt some rules and regulations to provide structure to utilizing those amenities.
Okay. This was reviewed by yourself and anybody else, the Parks Commission?
The
or?
Parks and Rec Commission,
And,
our solicitor, and this board.
Okay, the Parks Commission, how did they recommend the approval of this then? Okay, helped draft it and so on, so.
Yes.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board? Not a call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-R-30.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Thank you. Okay, item number 18, Resolution 2019-R31. This is a policy for prescription safety glasses reimbursement. I think Mr. Shaw, Mr. Metesky, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This request came out of the Safety Committee. Currently, people employees that are required to wear safety glasses as part of their job, and also have eyeglasses, have to put the plastic lenses over top of their current prescription lenses. These would be to provide those employees with prescription safety glasses, side shields, safety glass, the whole 9 yards, rather than having to wear the over glasses, which they fall off, they get hot, they're sweaty, there's lots of problems with them. And so it also sort of mirrors our vision policy in as much as it's limited to a specified dollar amount, $125 every 2 years. And our vision policy allows for, generally allows for new glasses every 2 years.
Okay. That sounds fair. Any questions or comments among the board?
I'll just add, this was a recommendation from the employees on the safety committee that I know Mark has been looking into, and it's found to be a pretty reasonable accommodation for this board to make outside of our typical contractual issues and our labor contracts and other healthcare issues. But we thought it was a reasonable request from our employees, and thought it was not that costly to provide that service. So
Yeah. Yeah, and it also creates more of a safety too. If anybody here's ever worn glasses like I have in the past, when you wear glasses and you put the safety glasses over it, it kind of distorts your vision and you can't really have perception, so there could be a safety issue. So I'm glad that we're getting prescription safety glasses for our employees that need them. So just wanted to add that. So
I'm sure I'll make a motion to approve
Okay.
Resolution 2019-R31.
Do I hear a second on that?
I will second that.
Okay, Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Okay, our next item number 19, agreement to assign unpaid accounts from advanced disposal.
Yes, under the Township Code, after the waste services provider makes reasonable attempts to obtain payment for the waste collection services rendered, it may assign those claims to the Township, which would enable the Township to render the monies owed as municipal claims for which a lien on the property can be placed. In this situation, Advanced Disposal has two accounts. They have many more, but these two in particular that have not paid a number of invoices. Advanced has established that they made reasonable attempts to collect these monies, albeit unsuccessfully. These two accounts in particular are associated with properties that will be coming up for sheriff's sale later this month. So under this agreement, they are assigning, Advance is assigning their rights to these accounts to the Township, which will then convert these to municipal claims with the hope that we will be able to collect these monies owed as part of the sheriff's sale.
Okay. Questions or comments? If not, a call for a motion to sign that agreement. Do we hear a motion? Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
And Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Okay, item number 20, I'm assuming we're going to have to table that one because we just got some information today, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It has not been completely vetted yet, so hopefully that
Right.
makes next meeting.
Yeah, they didn't get information to us on time, so we call for a motion on that, Mark Shaw?
I would, yes, simply I would
Table.
recommend a motion to
Okay.
table it.
Do I hear a motion to table this until our next meeting?
So moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes on that. Item number 21 is the May building construction report. Matt Waldinger.
Thank you. In the month of May, we had 2 new homes permits issued, as well as 8 additions or remodels, for a total of 10 residential permits with a value of approximately $985,000. We also issued a total of 26 permits for non-residential structures, either new construction or additions, for a total of $1.5 million. Altogether, there were 36 permits issued, total, increased value of $2,498,079, and that brought in $6,100 in permit fees to the Planning and Development Department. This report will be available later today online, and hard copies will also be available in the Planning and Development office.
Okay, sounds good. Oop. Excuse me a second. Here we go. Okay, item number 22, communications, starting with the treasurer. Mark Jaheski, do you have anything for us?
Nothing further, no.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, do you have something?
We have some hiring requests.
Okay.
From Diane Lyons. First is a part-time dispatcher hire. And that would be, a new hire would be Lindsay Weidler. Hire date would be retroactive to June 1st, at a rate of $12 per hour. And Jacqueline Polka, also retroactive to June 1st, at a rate of $12 per hour.
Okay. Okay. Do I hear a motion on that hiring? You made the motion on that, John?
I'll put that forward in the form of a motion, please.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
And Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes, too. Okay. You want to handle the other one, or do you want me to handle it? Doesn't matter. You know.
Next is from our Public Services Department. This is a request to hire Matthew Danilko as a part-time seasonal heavy equipment operator to be effective retroactive to June 3rd at a rate of $10 per hour.
Okay. That's in the form of a motion. Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. And there's, I think, one more there from
Well, as long as Ms. Marsteller is here.
You have the list of...
But I know I have about 4 folks that I'm hoping to hire.
Okay. Actually, more than that. Yeah. Yeah.
The list is provided, John.
Yeah, the list is provided. rates vary between
And
7 and
actually,
6.
this is for our recreation programming for the season.
Yeah, seasonal
Correct,
hire.
yes. So
Okay.
some seasonal lifeguards, some concession stand employees, folks to work at the gymnastics program we have, day camp counselors, and a golf course clubhouse attendant.
Okay. Okay. I'll put that in the form of a motion. How's that sound, John? Didn't mean to steal your thunder. Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. John, do you have anything else there?
That's it for me.
Okay. I have one request, and it is information too. This comes from me and the subject is meeting attendance, asking for authorization to attend the June 20th meeting of the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry Accessibility Board, of which I am an appointee and representative. All travel costs and lodging are covered by the Commonwealth. I put that in the form of a motion to approve that travel request.
I'll move to approve the travel request.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes, thank you. Just one other thing, just a bit of information here. This Friday, of course, is Flag Day, June the 14th. And also on this day at 11 a.m., of course 11 in the morning on Friday, the Presque Isle Garden Club will be having a dedication of the Blue Star Monument. This will be at the Veterans Park, which is up at Zimmerly Road and Love Road. The dedication begins at 11 a.m., so you want to get there before that, where there's some speakers that are coming. This is handled through the Garden Club, but this is something of note because it is the Blue Star marker that's going to be dedicated at our Veterans Park. There will be some refreshments afterwards, is that correct? Is there anything I've missed on this that should be covered, or?
No, the Presque Isle Garden Club has been leading this effort. It's a,
Yes, they have.
national recognized, I guess, marker that's going to be in place. It's a special award to have it at our park.
Yes.
So there'll be several distinguished guests there and light refreshments afterwards.
Right. This would be a nice added feature to our to the Veterans Park, aptly named. So, just wanted to let people know about that. That's all I have. Jim Bach, do you have anything?
I have two requests from the Police Department, Chief Scott Height. The first request was presented at our May 28th meeting. It was tabled due to some additional information that we needed to obtain from Chief Height. We have since obtained that information. He's requesting to purchase 16 cell phones for the police department inventory. These would, a good portion of these phones would be utilized in the patrol vehicles, and this is through AT&T, and it gives the officers the capability to also do a push-to-talk option, which provides additional communication options above and beyond their actual radio in the vehicle. So it is an officer safety issue, and it also provides anonymity when making phone calls to different people. The officers no longer have to use their personal cell phones within the vehicle. This additional cost would be $311.90 per month. It's going to be a year-to-year basis based on what ultimately happens with the new county 911 communication system. I'll put that request in the form of a motion.
Okay. Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. You have another one there, too?
There's
Jim?
one more here.
Yeah.
Chief Height is requesting approval for 2 officers to attend the Constitutional Use of Force training at Mercyhurst Police Academy on June 12th from 8 to 5. Travel by department vehicle, registration costs are $318 for that training.
Okay.
Put that in the motion.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bach, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I also vote yes. Anything else there, Jim?
That's all I have.
Okay. Solicitor Communications, Mark Shaw.
I don't have anything further, though. I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, if you had mentioned that there were executive sessions
Oh,
held
yeah, I'm
on
sorry, I missed that, yeah.
May 30th, 2019 and June 6th of 2019.
Yes, I thank you for catching that. I forgot to mention that. Thank you. Right to know request, Cheryl.
During the month of May, we had 5 requests. 3 were granted, 1 was denied, 1 was partially denied, for a total of 6 hours of preparation time.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Matt Puz, do you have anything for us?
I do not.
Okay, Matt Waldinger.
Nothing further.
Okay. Ashley, anything else? Gary Snyder?
Nothing further.
Okay. We're item number 23, citizens to be heard. Any citizens that wish to comment to the board about anything? Please come forward if you'd like. Sir, if you would. Please identify yourself for the record. There's a sheet there. You can sign your name. Thank you.
My name is Bob Sessler. I'm a Millcreek resident.
Yes.
Okay. The comment I have is regarding advanced disposal. As landlords, we're responsible for the tenants if they don't pay their water, their trash removal. However, like for example, Erie Waterworks, which we're contracted with, if the tenant doesn't pay their utilities, their fees and that, Erie Waterworks sends us, a reminder that the tenant is in default. And usually that's maybe the first or second quarter. However, with advanced disposal and even waste management, a lot of times we don't know almost a year before the tenant has paid their waste management bill. And the problem there is the late fees. By the time we get the bill, the late fees are excessive. And so I'm requesting, I know you have an agreement with advanced disposal. It would be possible to maybe somehow have agreement with them that the landlord is responsible to pay the utilities if the tenant doesn't. Could we get maybe communication sooner than waiting a year or 2 years before we find out? Because a lot of times we can't get a hold of the tenant's already left, we've already given their security deposit, we can't collect the money from them. So I'm just requesting that maybe Millcreek would, in their agreement with these utility companies, that they would communicate with the landlord or the owner of the property sooner than say a year or two, before it gets so expensive that there's nothing we can do but pay for it.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Grant, I thought this issue had come up before.
Yeah, if I could, we've been working on a process to try to get notice to the actual property owners sooner in the landlord-tenant situation.
Yeah.
Offhand, I can't recall what we had agreed upon, but I know that we've talked about that, and I think we were pressing Advance to take action earlier than later. Some of the challenges is trying to identify who the owner is as opposed to
right. I know
where you have the tenant, but you may not have the information on who owns the property, and it takes a little bit more effort to track that down. But that is an issue we have talked to them about and are working on some manner of trying to get notice sooner. And frankly, it benefits Advance to do that, because oftentimes the sooner they can get notice to the property owner, the sooner the issue gets resolved, so they actually get paid faster. So there is incentive for them to do that as well. It's just working it out logistically, I think.
Advance seems to be a little better, and waste management was pretty rough. I understand waste management's purchasing Advance down the road. So,
that's our understanding, yes.
I would suggest, that they seem to be pretty, I'm not, just my experience,
Yeah.
the more difficult than advanced disposal. But I just thought maybe I'd come to you and ask you to consider that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I can tell you that in my prior career as a code enforcement officer, I hear the plights of landlords. It's bad enough that you may get shorted on the rent. Now they're sticking you with a garbage bill too.
Exactly, right.
I understand your point there. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sessler.
Any other citizens to be heard? If you'd identify yourself and sign the sheet there, sir.
Jeremy Peterson. I am the Millcreek resident, CEO of Erie Metropolitan Transit Authority. Good morning, everyone. Hey, as a last-ditch effort, I wanted to come and see what Millcreek Township and EMTA can do to hopefully reopen the negotiation or discussion about our contribution to the MTA. I wanted to share with the supervisors, one of the last things I know you gentlemen have asked for us to reach out to other townships / municipalities and boards. I do have a packet of letters that I'm going to send out to the McCains, Fairviews, Union Cities, Albions, Gerards, and so forth. So I would like to share that with you as well, possibly even afterwards. We want to tell you that how important the MTA is to Millcreek Township. I think before in previous meetings, there's been a lot of back and forth bickering, so to speak. We want to end that. We want to, obviously, I think you guys know how important our transportation company is to your township. There's been a lot of public outcry since the Presque Isle Express just started yesterday about having some extension to, east side of Erie folks, even northeast, and west side folks, as far as Fairview to come in to Millcreek to visit the park. Unfortunately, we would like to entertain that, once again, flourish our service at Millcreek, but with obviously the cuts of contribution would inhibit us to do that. So, once again, we've heard from a lot of people over the last few months in regards to cuts and reductions to routes. I will assure you that will have to happen. We've heard, the magic number of 6 routes. It may be 6 routes. Maybe a lot of reductions in routes and times. And we don't want to do that. We want the businesses to continue to flourish in Millcreek and continue to become more of a regional asset to the county.
Okay. Well, I'll ask the question here of maybe the elephant in the room, whatever you want to call it. I know we've heard a lot of things, a lot of comments, a lot of public outcry, positive, negative, whatever you want to call it. I guess my question is for my colleagues, is this matter done? In other words, are we done discussing this matter? And to quote from a former TV show, is that your final answer? I think we're at a point where we've donated, contributed, what, $2,500. Is that what we are going to do, or is there still room for discussion? I know there has been discussion. We keep on beating this thing. I know the tempers are starting to flare, other things of limiting time and who may speak before the board, upsetting things. This is not the way we should be conducting ourselves, all of us, I'm talking about, those that are coming to speak and making comments. We've heard the comments, and by no means am I sounding like I'm not sensitive to. I am very sensitive to what's going on. I think you guys know where I'm at. But I guess the question is for all of us, for the three members of this board, are we done hearing about it? And that way we can just say, hey, we don't want to hear this anymore. That's my question, guys. I don't know if anybody wants to answer that or what. Please don't take this the wrong way, Mr. Peterson. I'm tired of hearing about it too. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Roy, I can say that the board acted unanimously on our allocation to the MTA, and I stand by the decision.
Okay. Mr. Bach?
I stand by the decision as well, but I'm also receptive to other options. But it appears that those options really haven't been presented to us. I'm not quite sure what's different today than the past month or so. But I'm receptive to discussions.
Okay.
Okay, time is running out. Okay. I don't mean to be shutting anybody off here, by no means, Mr. Peterson, or anybody else that wants to speak, but that's why I had to ask the question. I know we have numerous people coming here and speaking. Believe me, I respect your First Amendment right to do that. It's just, we've heard these things over and over again. And I just wanted to get it on the record that here's where we are officially at. So I don't know if you want to reach out to Mr. Bach. I think Mr. Morgan has stated his case. I don't know. We've got a few days left in this month. I think that was the deadline. Is that correct, Mr. Peterson?
We have till the 30th of this month.
Okay.
Move fiscal year starts.
Yeah? Okay. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so pointed to you, sir. I just, you know,
We want to live up to the Embrace Millcreek Comprehensive Plan too.
I understand. So do I.
The state that we are
Right.
we play a vital role in Millcreek, so.
Right, I know, yes. And I do know we make reference to the EMTA being a vital transportation provider for us, mass transit, and that's about all we make in the comprehensive plan is that statement, so. But there's no plan as far as how it's going to be funded, if we should even do anything at all. And, yep, thank you, sir, appreciate your time. Thank you. Anyone else to speak? Being none, I'll call for a motion to adjourn at 10:45.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.